climate risks in the end materialize themselves as financial risks. And whether we are talking about impact on the mortgage collateral value of my house, which was just flooded, or impact on my financial performance as a farmer because there is a super dry season and I was not able to grow any crops, or impact on our possibility to sell our products if I'm producing gasoline cars 5 years from now on in Europe, and there's a huge push from government and also society against the gasoline powered cars, and I might be having difficulties to sustain my operations. All these impacts or events will lead to a financial side of things, and it will decrease our possibility to repay our debts, i.e. credit risk. Or on the investment side of things, it will impact negatively the value of our bonds or shares. If we are on insurance side of things, it will impact the likelihood and severity of the claims of the claims that we are going to receive based on the events that we have insured our customers against. Operational side of things, financial institutions still are exposed to physical risk as well, where the data centers can be flooded or individual branches can be put on fire by the bushfires if they are located in California or Australia. And liquidity side of things as well, impacting on the liquidity of the assets and also demands for liquidity. And when we're talking about transmission channels, we need to keep in mind that there is the micro level, so individual counterparty level, which these examples that I just mentioned, but there is also an impact on macro level because the entire economy is going to be impacted also in a certain way. One of the countries in European Union, Slovakia, which I am from, is heavily dependent on automotive production and manufacturing plant for its employment. Unfortunately, a lot of it is gasoline based production, right? Gasoline powered cars. So if the situation develops fast enough and the European Union is really going to kick hard against gasoline cars, a lot of people will be in trouble financially, employment wise, and that will have impact also on the other side of the economy, even much more greener companies and individuals, but they will be just impacted by the overall unfavorable state of the economy. And when thinking about the drivers, so let's just have a quick look on the main ones. Carbon footprint, already mentioned a couple of times. Carbon footprint is a great indicator of how exposed individual company is towards transition risk, because all the transition policy changes are going to for sure focus on the carbon the reduction and decarbonization. But there are many more, but carbon footprint is a good one to start. Industry segment describes both our exposure to transition risk and physical risk, because depending in which side of things we operate, if we are in a coal energy business or just coal mine, we are going very likely to be impacted very soon. But also certain industries are much more exposed to physical risk as well. If I'm a manufacturing producer that is heavily dependent on the availability of water, if there is a shortage of water, I will be impacted by physical risk, right? So different industries have different level of exposure to climate and physical risk as well. And last but not least, when thinking about physical risk, is also very much important to think about geographical location of where the counterparty or company is located. And contrary to the last decades where the banks were interested to know where the company is headquartered, we need to do much more for climate risk, because we need to know not where the company is located, headquartered, so it's a French manufacturing company, for example, but we need to know that the French manufacturing company has 50% of its factories located along coast near Shanghai. And if we know that, then we might need to consider that there is an increase of floods and extreme rainfalls there as well, right? And that kind of information and connection we need to do, which we were not used to do before. That's in a nutshell about the drivers to climate and climate risk and how they transmission into financial risk. Credit risk is probably one of the areas that is going to be hit the most by changing climate. And over the years, credit risk ratings have been of great help to support credit risk management activities. And The impact of changing climate will have to be reflected also in these external credit ratings. And what we need to consider, and what these companies will have to consider, is that there are new factors, there is a longer time horizon, and new data sources will needed to be considered. But in the end, there will be an impact on how the traditional credit risk ratings are being calculated and put together. Because in the end, they should represent and indicate the likelihood that the customer of us is not likely to pay us back, irrespective how it is caused, whether it's climate, whether it's anything else, whether it's just a wrong business model, or whether it's products that nobody's buying, whatever. In the end, this all should come together. There is a nice article from Naim, my colleague, on the impact of climate change on credit scoring, if you are interested. But yes, this is something that all the big producers of credit risk ratings are very actively working on. And connected to that is also this new emerging discipline, which is so-called the ESG ratings or ESG performance. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance performance, which is a bit broader than the environment, but it is also much more connected to the climate side of things than to the other element, the S&Gs. And what we see is that there is a already number of companies that produce so-called ESG rating, which is scoring the customers according to different criteria. So we see here an example of a methodology coming from one of the NGFS papers. And we see that for each of the pillars, we see score, and the score for environment comes from two sides of things. First is the exposure to climate changes, and also the other side of things is the management scores, how the management of the company is responding to these. So ESG ratings give us hope that we could use them to, in combination with credit ratings, to get a better understanding of how much exposure to climate there is with the particular counterparty. And this is an example of an ESG rating given by Sustainalytics to Royal Dutch Shell, and just gives you a feeling of what we can expect. And this information is already available. And of course, there are a lot of producers of these ratings, and they differ one from another. But at least we have something already, which is evolving, of course, but there is a great start already. And this is just for your reference, one of the articles that we wrote some time back on greening up the enterprise risk management processes of financial institutions, which summarize a number of observations that I already shared with you, but it gives you it in a written form with some extra additional information. So feel free to have a look by following the link below.